Are you aware that this is the day that the Lord has made? We should rejoice and be glad in it? Yeah. Amen. I always enjoy the worship and the praise, the opportunity to join with you. And I'm very blessed by these young girls or ladies, I'm not sure what we should call them, that help us out. What's that? One of them what? Oh, that's right. That is very close, like tomorrow. There's a passage in the Torah portion this week, Deuteronomy 32, verse 8, and it relates to Purim, and I have to train myself to say Purim, because I see P-U-R and I want to go pure. But in Hebrew, this word, that's an O, an English O. Hebrew's all messed up. Like I was telling Sharon, they have a het and a hey, which are basically both H. They have a tet and a tav, which are basically both T. They have kaf and he, But Purim is the word. You can say it like a poor man. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when He separated the sons of man, He set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. For the Lord's portion is His people, Jacob is the allotment of His inheritance. Most people miss that verse. But what that verse says is that the whole layout of the world is based upon the sons of Israel. And that the center of the world is Jerusalem. Remember, God says, I don't know why. I think I must have a gift with this one. It doesn't do it to Sharon. Anyway.
That's because I don't put that on me. I just leave it on the stand.
But that would make me be anchored.
I'm not saying that.
This would remind us of the good ship Lollipop in harbor. But this week we celebrated Purim, and we had a delightful little party over in the center. How many narrators did you have, Sharon? 6. And we read the entire story of Haman, they would say, of Haman. That's right. And Esther and Mordecai. And we had a lot of fun, and all the kids got involved, and you were supposed to come in the costume of your favorite biblical character. I didn't do it. I thought, if I had a coat of many colors, I would have come as Joseph, because I do think, next to Yeshua, he is my favorite. I loved what Dallas came in. He was all wrapped in grave clothes. He was Lazarus. And of course, you know what Ella was. She was Esther. She was the queen. But it was a lot of fun. And another thing, any of you here like raisin-filled cookies? You missed this party. It was the Hamantaschen are raisin-filled cookies, and they're awesome. Most of my kids hate them, so there were more for me.
There was leftovers. We got some.
Do you like them? Yeah, you like them. I know Lois hates them.
It's Alan and Lois that hate them.
Oh, that's right. Your dad liked them, didn't he?
Oh, his favorite.
Yeah, I love raisin-filled cookies because it's a perfect way to divide an audience. The ones who love them and the people who hate them.
There's no in between.
And those of you who know, this past week, Melvin has been going through a tough time. He actually seems to have kind of rallied. They thought he was on his deathbed, but the way your mind works. Melvin is Pearl's younger brother. And whenever I see raisin-filled cookies, I always think of Desi and Pearl, because no one could make raisin-filled cookies like Desi and Pearl. And they are John's favorite cookie to this day, which always makes me laugh because, again, most of my family, you say raisin-filled cookies. And all that to say, this was the week to celebrate Purim. And I wanted to take just a minute today before we separate for classes. How many of you are aware that the fight in the book of Esther is not over. Are you aware there's a spirit in the land that wants to exterminate the people of Israel? It doesn't just want to defeat them, it wants to destroy them. And I think this is important, not because we want to learn to hate people, but I think Ephesians helps us because he says our war isn't against flesh and blood. We wrestle against principalities. But there is a spirit in the world today that's almost gone through the entire world. And this spirit wants to destroy particularly the Jews, but it's interesting. Once it gets done with the Jews, it wants to move to the Christians. And people mistake the idea that this spirit wants peace with Judaism and Christianity. It doesn't. This spirit wants to destroy them. Now, am I saying everybody is this way? No, I'm just saying the spirit is there. And I think people sometimes want to believe it's not there. You're all aware of the attacks that were in Brussels this week. Are you aware of the significance of Brussels? Brussels is in Belgium, but what is Brussels, the city? It's the head of something. The European Union. This is the capital of the European Union. And so the attack against Brussels was a calculated attack to let Europe know that they're on notice, that they're coming after them. And because of this attack, and it's interesting too, Israel, the U.S., a whole bunch of countries, but particularly Israel, went to Belgium and looked at their airport security and said, this is not up to par, you are going to have problems. And then they were warned by several people that ISIS was planning an attack on Brussels. And what did they do? Did absolutely nothing. These people took a taxi to the airport. And when it got time to get out of the taxi, they told the taxi driver, don't touch our luggage. They carried that luggage into the airport. And then, of course, 2 of them blew themselves up and killed about, I think, 10, 14 people and wounded a huge number. Then the one that's still, I don't think they've caught him, maybe they have. Anyway, went to the railway station and killed about 20 people. And I think 200 or 300 people were injured. Here's my point. Europe doesn't want to believe that they're in the crosshairs. And it also wants to believe that if we ignore this, or better yet, let's make peace with them. What about ISIS wants to make peace? ISIS has this murderous, and it's interesting to me that when you look at Haman, remember in the book of Esther, Haman is so angry because Mordecai doesn't bow to him. But is it a personal thing? No, Haman doesn't bow to people. When they ask Mordecai, did I say Haman? When they ask Mordecai why he doesn't bow to Haman, he says, I bow only to God. But Haman takes it as an affront, and here's the interesting thing. He's not content to destroy Haman, he wants to destroy all the Jews. That spirit is there today. And I think we're ignorant if we don't realize that the U.S. is just as surely in the crosshairs as the nation of Israel. This week, one of the Palestinian leaders was assuring Europe that the terrorist attacks against Israel are different than those carried out in Europe. How many of you believe that? That's like, yeah, really. And let me see if these attacks are driven by despair over the occupation. It's one of the sad things. Netanyahu gave a talk this week, and it was interesting what he said. He said the attacks in Israel and the attacks in Europe are not driven by despair. He said they are attacks motivated by hope. And this hope is to destroy the Israeli state and replace it with a Palestinian state. And in Europe, what do they want to do? They want to destroy the governments of the West and replace them with a caliphate. And they don't, this isn't a secret. They say this is what they want to do. They want to go back to the Islamic government of the 800s. And what's interesting, they want to carry all the barbarity and the cruelty with it. Beheadings, cutting off hands, organs, stoning women. Most incredible thing, they bury these women up to about here. Then they have stones this size and stone them. And people want to ignore this. It's spiritually motivated. It's interesting to me that this particular year, Purim and Easter are together, and Passover is a month later. And we might talk a little bit about that in our other class. But have you noticed there's a relationship between Purim, and the resurrection? Because in the book of Esther, what's going to happen to the Jewish people? They're going to be totally destroyed, aren't they? There's a decree that goes out from King Ahasuerus, or who knows how to say his name, Ahasuerus. But, and it says the Jews are open game. Anyone can go after them. They're going to be destroyed. And of course, through Esther, God works this tremendous miracle. And the Jews are saved, and their enemies are destroyed. Now, what's funny is that the name Esther and Easter are quite close. And Easter has a lot more to do with Esther than it does Ishtar. And I will talk about that a little later. But I just jotted down some things. I thought this was an interesting story. There's a Israeli Arab who spoke out against, in the United Kingdom, they had something they call Israeli Apartheid Week. In other words, Israel is an apartheid regime. They're the favored people, the Jews, and the downcast Arabs. So it says, this across the UK, there's been this week, some have supported it, others have opposed it. But the Zionist Federation in the UK last week invited an IDF major. This man is an Islam, he's a Muslim, he's an Arab, but he's in the IDF. He was able to attend campuses up and down the country specifically to address and counter some of the claims involved. This Israeli Muslim speaking. I am an Israeli, an Arab, and the highest ranked Muslim in the IDF. Is Israel inherently racist and apartheid state? Well, do you think that such a country would tolerate a person like myself getting to the position I am today? 20% of Israelis are non-Jewish, have full rights, and are represented throughout society. I do not serve in the army to kill people, I serve in it to save people. When Hamas fires rockets or Fatah encourages stabbings, we are here to protect the lives of all Israeli citizens, Jewish and non-Jewish. The town I grew up in did not recognize the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. I did not learn Hebrew until I was 17. I was raised to believe the worst things about Jews, and had I not eventually met and worked alongside them, I might still believe those things today. During my time in the United Kingdom, I spoke alongside a fellow soldier, a medic who has treated both Israeli soldiers and Palestinian terrorists without distinction. We were the Muslims who protect Jewish lives and the Jew who saves Muslim lives. There's only one country in the Middle East that could produce a couple like that, and it sure as unprintable ain't an apartheid state. How many of you know that's not in the news? Yeah, I'm fortunate. I know a couple. In fact, what's the song that the kids used to dance to, Watchman on the Wall?
Yeah.
Dum da dum dum da dum da dum. It was written by Barry and Botcha Siegel, and they're the ones who send me every week, well, it's actually 2 and 3 times a week, what's going on in Israel. And there's just a couple of things that I just want to bring up, because I don't think we're aware of it. And it's not a matter to be unhappy. It's a matter for prayer and intercession and to realize that when the Bible says to blot out the memory of Amalek, it means to do that. The idea of any spirit that would destroy God's people. When you look at what God really opposes in Scripture, it's preventing people from entering their inheritance. That's the thing he hates more than anything else. And Amalek is a descendant, you can guess, of Esau. I'll just read you the headlines. Hezbollah vows to invade Israel in the next war. Hamas has fully restocked its missile arsenal. And here's the interesting thing. You'll hear about the poor, mistreated Palestinian Arabs and how Israel has cut off their supplies, their water, their electricity, and their money. They're all lies. The problem is the money going to the Palestinians at this time has all gone in to build tunnels and to rearm. They've got literally thousands of missiles prepared. And remember, the whole world leaned on Israel to give up Gaza, which if you look at a picture of Israel, it's right in the middle. Said, turn that back to the Arabs, and that will bring peace. So Israel did that. What's it become? It's become a source of missiles. Yeah. And then the Palestinian Authority was boasting of the achievements of the Intifada. You know what's interesting? The stabbings hurt Israel, but almost every time there's a stabbing, more young Palestinian Arabs are killed than Israeli Jews. Because 2 or 3 make an attack, somebody comes upon the attack, and all the attackers are killed. What happens to those attackers in their Palestinian villages? They're buried with full honors. Their families are given monthly stipends. They become heroes. They actually will name streets after people that butcher and murder babies and old people and anyone else in between. And the world would tell you that Israel is the oppressor. This is how twisted it is. Just a couple things. I thought this was kind of a sad statement. Stickers advising consumers not to buy Israeli-made products have been surfacing throughout Canada. Warning, the stickers state, do not buy this product, made in Israel, a country violating international law, the Fourth Geneva Convention, and fundamental human rights. What's amazing? This happened right after the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement was prohibited by Canada. Any place and see, here's the thing that kind of frightens me now. In this country, Islamic education has been taken over by this kind of thinking. And when you look at the books that young Muslims are being taught by, many times Israel is not even on the map. It doesn't even appear on the map. And then the Jews are made to be the culprits that caused every problem in history. I remember reading a statement. It was in the introduction to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a particularly noxious hoax. But it said, the Jews invented communism in Russia in 1918. You know, and even I in high school knew that was preposterous. But this is the kind of, and this is what the poor kids are taught. How many of you know that if you pour something into children, it will become reality? And part of what God's calling us to do in this day, which is a day of gathering, is to break down the old walls and the barriers between people. And what's going on within the Muslim education and young people is just the opposite. Yeah, their textbooks say things like Israel has no historic claim to the land, and interestingly, they'll say it's a hoax that there was ever a temple on the Temple Mount, in spite of the fact there are artifacts all over there. You know, here's the interesting thing, and I don't want to pick on Muslims really, but how many times is Jerusalem mentioned in the Quran? Muslim holy book. It's now supposedly the third most important site in Islam. Do you know how many times Jerusalem is mentioned? You got it, 0. It's never mentioned. What's more, in the Quran, it says that the land belongs to the Jews. It's an inconvenient fact. One other thing that I thought was, I'm a little bit puzzled. You know, we just passed a peace agreement with Iran. What country stands to lose the most if Iran gets out of control? Israel. Well, it should make you happy to know that they had a test firing of missiles. And you know what they wrote on the missiles before they fired them? Israel must be wiped out. And yet we've created a peace agreement with them, which firing these missiles violates. Guess what we're doing about it? Criticizing Israel for stirring up hostilities. I just think it's an important thing. As we celebrate Purim, we remember what God did for the Jews in Persia at that time. I want us to be aware that the spirits involved in that conflict are still alive today. The solution is not to hate. The solution is not to kill. But the solution is not ignorance. The solution is not pretending. Like in our country right now, for whatever reason, I don't understand this with the Obama administration. They're so tone deaf when it comes to Israel, it's like they don't have a life. When Israel was saying, don't sign this agreement, it puts us unfairly in the crosshairs and makes us vulnerable, we acted like it was irrelevant. In fact, as you all know, when that thing was sent to the Senate, several Democratic senators would not vote for it. Why? They were Jews. Schultz is one of the ranking Senate Democrats from New York, and he at least knew that this is suicide for Israel. Why is that important? A couple of things. The spirit is still here. The spirit that was inside Nazi Germany, the spirit that moves in radical Islam today, that was in Haman, it's still alive. And if we think that all it cares about is the Jews, we miss the fact that there's kind of a slogan among the radical Islamic groups that says, first the Saturday people and then the Sunday people. So, nothing to be despairing about, but just to recognize that it's not gone. In fact, I think those that are prayer warriors today, intercessors, I think most of them would agree with this statement that the strong men, the strongholds that we see in the Bible are all present today. They have not been defeated. In people's lives they have been. In many ways they have no impact. But if you look at our culture today and the way we throw away children, it looks like Moloch is still around. When you look at the sexual deviancy and everything, Baal and Asherah, certainly. I mean, these strongholds have not come down, but the promise is in Revelation 12, now the kingdom and the authority of our Messiah has come. For the accuser of the brethren has been cast down. So we know we live in a day when these things are going to be taken down. But it will require that we be aware and on our toes. Do we have some people to come say the verse? we shouldn't smile, I guess. Luke chapter 24, verse 7. The Son of Man
Son of Man
must be delivered
must be delivered
into the hands of sinful men,
into the hands of sinful men,
be crucified,
be crucified,
and on the third day
the third day
be raised again.
be raised again.
Repeat the verse, please. Luke 24, verse 7. The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. You may be dismissed for your classes.